Northern France, December 1944. The temperature hovers just above freezing as fog rolls across the frozen fields near the German border. A Wehrmacht Hauptmann, a captain, adjusts his field glasses, scanning the American positions roughly 900 yards across the valley. He feels safe at this distance, comfortable even. His experience on the Eastern Front taught him that Soviet riflemen were dangerous at 300 yards, maybe 400 if you were unlucky. But 900 yards? That's artillery distance. Sniper distance, perhaps, but only for the most elite Scharfschützen with perfect conditions. He never felt the bullet that killed him. The .30-06 round, fired from an M1903 Springfield rifle, crossed that 900-yard gap in just over a second. It struck him precisely through the upper chest, the impact throwing him backward into the frozen mud. His subordinates scrambled for cover, shouting in confusion and terror. Where had the shot come from? How was it possible at that range? 300 yards behind American lines, a Kentucky farm boy named Private First Class James Hendricks worked the bolt on his Springfield, chambering another round. Through his Weaver 330C scope, he'd already acquired his next target, a German NCO attempting to organize his panicked squad. Hendricks had been dropping squirrels from tree branches since he was 8 years old. This wasn't much different. He controlled his breathing, felt the wind on his face, made a minute adjustment for the crosswind, and squeezed. Another German fell. For months leading up to the invasion of Europe, British and even some American officers had quietly questioned whether American infantrymen possessed the marksmanship skills necessary for modern warfare. The U.S. military emphasized individual rifle skills, yes, but European critics argued this was outdated, that modern combat was about automatic weapons, artillery, and coordinated fire. The careful, aimed shot of a rifleman seemed almost quaint in an age of machine guns and carpet bombing. The Wehrmacht had similar assessments. German intelligence reports from 1943 characterized American infantry as adequately equipped but tactically inexperienced, with marksmanship capabilities inferior to German standards. They expected American forces to rely on overwhelming firepower and numbers, not precision shooting. They mocked American riflemen as inaccurate, until Springfield snipers dropped officers at distances the Germans had assumed were completely safe. This is the story of how American marksmen, many of them hunters and farm boys who'd grown up with rifles in their hands, fundamentally changed the mathematics of infantry combat in World War II. This is the story of the Springfield rifle, the men who carried it, and the moment when American marksmanship proved itself against the most professional army in the world. By 1941, the M1903 Springfield rifle was already considered obsolete by modern military standards. The U.S. Army had officially replaced it with the M1 Garand, a revolutionary semi-automatic rifle that could fire 8 rounds as fast as a soldier could pull the trigger. The Garand was faster, held more ammunition, and represented the future of infantry combat. But the Springfield had something the Garand didn't: uncompromising accuracy. The M1903 Springfield was a bolt-action rifle, a design philosophy that dated back to the late 19th century. It fired the powerful .30-06 cartridge, held 5 rounds in an internal magazine, and required the shooter to manually work the bolt between shots. In terms of rate of fire, it couldn't compete with semi-automatic weapons. But for pure accuracy, the ability to put a bullet exactly where you wanted it at extended range, the Springfield was in a class by itself. The rifle's accuracy came from its design. The bolt-action mechanism locked up tighter than semi-automatic actions, creating a more consistent platform. The barrel was carefully manufactured to exacting standards. The trigger, when properly adjusted, broke clean and crisp. The rifle was inherently stable and predictable, shot after shot. When the U.S. Marine Corps and Army began developing dedicated sniper programs in the early 1940s, they didn't choose the modern Garand. They chose the obsolete Springfield, modified it with a scope mount, and equipped it with precision optics, usually a Weaver 330C scope or the later M73 scope. The result was designated the M1903A4, and it would become one of the most effective sniper systems of World War II. But the rifle was only half the equation. The other half was the men who carried it. America in the 1940s was still a largely rural nation. Millions of young men had grown up in small towns and farming communities where hunting wasn't just recreation, it was how you put meat on the table. They'd learned to shoot almost as soon as they could hold a rifle, spending countless hours in fields and forests, developing an instinctive understanding of wind, distance, and bullet trajectory. This wasn't formal military training. It was something deeper, a cultural inheritance passed down from fathers to sons, practiced until it became second nature. These young men didn't think about shooting, they just shot. And they shot well. When these men enlisted or were drafted after Pearl Harbor, the U.S. military discovered it had a remarkable resource, a generation of soldiers who were already expert marksmen. They didn't need to be taught how to shoot. They needed to be taught how to apply those skills in combat. The Marine Corps, in particular, recognized this advantage. The Corps had always emphasized marksmanship. Every Marine was expected to be a rifleman first, regardless of his specialty. When the Corps began selecting men for scout sniper training, they drew from a pool of soldiers who already knew their way around a rifle. Private First Class Harold Moore from rural Tennessee exemplified this background. He'd been hunting in the Smoky Mountains since childhood, taking white-tailed deer at ranges that required precise shooting and careful stalking. When he qualified with the Springfield rifle at Camp Lejeune, he scored expertly on his first attempt, hitting targets at 600 yards that many soldiers struggled to hit at 300. It wasn't anything special, Moore would later recall in an interview. Back home, if you couldn't hit a deer at 400 yards, you didn't eat venison that winter. The rifle was different, but the principles were the same. Know your range, read the wind, control your breathing, squeeze smoothly. The German army, for all its professionalism and tactical sophistication, didn't have this advantage. German soldiers received thorough military training, but most came from urban backgrounds and learned to shoot in the military, not in childhood. German snipers were carefully selected and trained, but they were relatively few in number. The Americans, by contrast, had thousands of soldiers who could shoot at sniper-level accuracy, given the right equipment and training. This difference would prove decisive on the battlefields of Europe and the Pacific. The Allied invasion of Normandy on June 6, 1944, was the largest amphibious assault in history. But after the beaches were secured, American forces encountered an unexpected nightmare, the Norman bocage, hedgerow country. The Norman hedgerows were ancient, some dating back centuries. They consisted of dense earth embankments, 4 to 6 feet high, topped with thick vegetation and trees. They divided the countryside into countless small fields, creating a patchwork maze that heavily favored defenders. German forces used the hedgerows brilliantly, turning each field into a potential kill zone. American infantry advancing through the bocage faced a terrible problem. They couldn't see the enemy until they were almost on top of them. German machine gun nests, positioned in the hedgerows, could wait until American troops were exposed in the open fields, then cut them down with withering fire. Attacking these positions with direct assault resulted in horrific casualties. This was where American snipers proved their worth. Equipped with their Springfield rifles and trained to operate independently, American snipers began hunting German machine gun teams, mortar crews, and forward observers. They would infiltrate ahead of the main American lines, find concealed positions with good fields of fire, and wait with patient, predatory focus. If you're enjoying this journey through history, remember to subscribe to U.S. Last Stand, where we bring forgotten battles, hidden stories, and untold final stands of World War II and Vietnam War truths back to life. Sergeant William Forrester from Michigan described the tactics. We'd move at night, get into position before dawn. Then we'd glass the German positions, looking for anyone who stood out. Officers, NCOs, machine gunners. The key was patience. Sometimes we'd wait hours for the right shot. But when we took it, we made it count. The Springfield's accuracy at range meant American snipers could engage German positions from distances the Germans considered safe. A German machine gun team might feel secure 600 or 700 yards behind their forward positions, but that was well within effective range for a Springfield with a skilled shooter behind it. The psychological impact was devastating. German soldiers in the bocage quickly learned that nowhere was safe. Officers stopped exposing themselves to direct troops. Machine gun teams became reluctant to reveal their positions. The initiative shifted subtly but critically toward the Americans. One captured German Unteroffizier, sergeant, told his interrogators, "We could not understand how the Americans were hitting our positions from such distances. Our own snipers said it should not be possible with standard infantry rifles. We thought perhaps they had developed new weapons. When we learned they were using old bolt-action rifles we thought obsolete, we could not believe it." The Germans weren't wrong to be skeptical. By the standards of 1944, bolt-action rifles were obsolete. But the Springfield, in trained hands, proved that accuracy could be more valuable than rate of fire. One well-aimed shot that eliminated a machine gun team leader or an artillery observer was worth 100 rounds sprayed in the general direction of the enemy. If the Norman hedgerows were a nightmare, the Hürtgen Forest was hell itself. Located along the German-Belgian border, the Hürtgen was a dense, dark woodland that swallowed entire divisions. The battle for the Hürtgen Forest, lasting from September 1944 to February 1945, would become one of the longest and bloodiest battles American forces fought in Europe. The forest terrain negated many American advantages. Artillery was less effective because the thick canopy and uneven terrain dispersed shrapnel. Tanks were nearly useless on the narrow, muddy forest trails. Air support couldn't see through the trees. Infantry combat devolved into brutal, close-range encounters where visibility was measured in yards, not hundreds of yards. But even here, American snipers found ways to make their rifles speak. The Springfield snipers adapted to the forest environment, learning to use the terrain to their advantage. They positioned themselves in elevated positions, in trees when possible, on ridges and slopes, where they could observe German supply routes, command posts, and reserve positions. They worked in two-man teams, with one spotter and one shooter, providing mutual security and increased observation capability. Private Thomas Chun from California, a second-generation Chinese-American sniper, operated in the Hürtgen for 3 weeks straight during November 1944. His account provides insight into the sniper's experience. The forest was always dark, always wet. You could hear the Germans moving, sometimes hear them talking, but visibility was terrible. We'd find a position overlooking one of their supply trails and wait, sometimes for hours, sometimes for days. When targets presented themselves, usually supply troops or officers moving between positions, we'd engage. The Springfield was perfect for this because it was quiet compared to the Garand. One shot, then silence. The Germans would scramble, search, but they never found us. We'd already be moving to a new position. The German army, experienced from years of brutal combat on the Eastern Front, had its own skilled snipers. The Hürtgen Forest became the site of a deadly, invisible war within the larger battle, snipers hunting snipers, each side trying to eliminate the other's best marksman. American snipers developed counter-sniper tactics specifically for the forest. They learned to identify likely German sniper positions by studying the terrain and German tactical doctrine. They used decoys, helmets raised on sticks or dummy positions, to draw fire and reveal enemy locations. When they located a German sniper, they engaged with patient, methodical precision. Corporal James Rutherford from Montana stalked and eliminated a German sniper who had killed 3 American soldiers over 2 days. Rutherford spent 6 hours moving less than 200 yards, using every bit of cover and moving only when sounds from the nearby battle masked any noise he made. When he finally had a clear shot, he waited another 30 minutes to ensure the German wasn't bait for another hidden sniper. The shot, when it came, was from less than 100 yards, close range for a sniper duel, and it was perfect. "I didn't feel good about it," Rutherford said later. "He was just doing his job, same as me. But he'd killed my friends, and if I didn't stop him, he'd kill more." That's what it came down to, him or us. To truly understand what American Springfield snipers achieved, you need to understand the technical challenge they faced every time they squeezed the trigger. At 800 yards, a typical engagement distance for American snipers in Europe, a .30-06 bullet will drop approximately 180 inches below the line of sight if the rifle is zeroed at 200 yards. That's 15 feet. The shooter must compensate for this drop by aiming high, using either scope adjustments or holdover techniques. But bullet drop is only part of the equation. Wind is the invisible killer of long-range accuracy. A 10-mile-per-hour crosswind will push a .30-06 bullet approximately 36 inches off course at 800 yards. The shooter must estimate wind speed and direction, calculate the drift, and adjust aim accordingly. Then there's the human factor. At 800 yards, a human torso presents a target roughly 18 inches wide. With bullet drop and wind drift, the margin for error is minimal. The shooter must estimate range precisely, read wind conditions accurately, maintain a steady position, control breathing, and execute a smooth trigger press, all while potentially under fire themselves, in weather ranging from scorching heat to freezing cold, often after hours or days with minimal sleep and food. And they did this without modern technology. No laser rangefinders, no ballistic calculators, no wind meters. They estimated the range using visual cues and map reading. They read wind by watching vegetation, feeling it on their faces, and observing mirage effects through their scopes. They calculated the necessary adjustments in their heads, made their corrections, and took their shots. The Springfield rifle made it possible because of its inherent accuracy and the consistency of the .30-06 cartridge. The Weaver and M1903 scopes made it possible by providing magnification and precise aiming points. But ultimately, what made it possible was the skill of the men behind the rifles. German snipers, skilled as they were, typically engaged at shorter ranges, 400 to 600 yards in most cases. They used a variety of rifles, including scoped Kar 98K rifles and captured Soviet Mosin-Nagants, but none had the consistent accuracy of the Springfield at extreme range. More importantly, German sniper doctrine emphasized defensive employment, concealment, and patience, waiting for targets to present themselves. American snipers were more aggressive. They actively hunted targets, moved frequently, and engaged at whatever range provided the best opportunity. This aggressive doctrine, combined with superior equipment and the marksmanship skills of American shooters, gave them a decisive edge. By late 1944, German intelligence assessments of American marksmanship had undergone a dramatic revision. Reports that had once characterized American riflemen as adequately trained but tactically inexperienced now warned of exceptionally skilled sharpshooters capable of precision fire at extended ranges. German officers who had dismissed American marksmanship found themselves confined to command posts, unable to move forward to observe their own lines without risking instant death from an invisible shooter. German NCOs learned to avoid exposing themselves even briefly, knowing that American snipers were watching and waiting. Forward observers, artillery spotters, and machine gun team leaders, the critical nodes in the German tactical system, became priority targets and suffered accordingly. The mockery had turned to respect, earned in the most brutal way possible. One particularly telling incident occurred during the Battle of the Bulge in December 1944. A German SS officer, interrogated after capture, expressed genuine bewilderment. "We were told the Americans were soft, that they relied on machines and numbers because they lacked the warrior spirit. But your snipers, they fight like ghosts. They shoot like gods. How do you train men to shoot so well?" The interrogator, an American intelligence officer, replied with a truth the German couldn't fully comprehend. "We don't train them to shoot. They already know how. We just train them to be soldiers." This distinction, between men trained to shoot and men who grew up shooting, defined the American sniper advantage in World War II. While European battlefields tested American snipers in hedgerows and forests, the Pacific theater presented entirely different challenges. Dense jungle, extreme heat and humidity, shorter engagement distances, and a fanatical enemy that refused surrender created conditions unlike anything in Europe. Yet here too, Springfield snipers proved decisive. Marine Corps Scout snipers, equipped with M1903A4 rifles, operated throughout the Pacific Island campaigns. On Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Saipan, Peleliu, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa, they hunted Japanese officers, NCOs, and machine gun crews with lethal efficiency. The Japanese military emphasized fighting spirit and close combat, but they also fielded their own skilled snipers. Japanese snipers were masters of camouflage and concealment, often tying themselves into trees where they could remain hidden for days. The duel between American and Japanese snipers in the Pacific was particularly deadly, with both sides demonstrating remarkable skill and determination. Gunnery Sergeant Carlos Norman Hathcock II, who would later become one of the most famous American snipers in Vietnam, learned his trade from World War II Marine snipers who had fought in the Pacific. They passed down hard-won lessons: patience, attention to detail, respect for the enemy's capabilities, and absolute commitment to the mission. Private First Class Daniel Martinez from New Mexico, a Marine sniper on Polilliu, exemplified the American approach. The Japanese were brave, you had to give them that. Their snipers were good, really good. But we had two advantages: better equipment, and we'd been shooting since we were kids. That Springfield rifle, in jungle conditions with the heat and humidity, it just kept working. And when you needed to make a 500-yard shot in heavy vegetation, when you had one chance to hit a machine gun nest before they pinned down your platoon, that Springfield delivered. The statistics tell part of the story. American snipers in World War II are credited with thousands of confirmed kills. They disrupted enemy operations, degraded enemy morale, and saved countless American lives by eliminating enemy leaders and key weapons crews before they could inflict casualties. But statistics can't capture what these men carried home with them. They were hunters who became killers, marksmen who became warriors. They used skills learned in peaceful pursuit, putting food on the family table, competing at county shooting matches, to end human lives at distances where they could see their targets clearly through magnified optics. Many struggled after the war. Sergeant William Forrester, the Michigan sniper who'd fought through the hedgerows of Normandy, never hunted again. "I couldn't," he said in a 1985 interview. "Every time I looked through a scope, I saw those German boys falling. I gave my rifles to my nephews and told them I was done." Others compartmentalized, separating what they'd done in war from who they were in peace. They rarely spoke about their experiences, even to family. The weight of what they'd done, necessary as it was, wasn't something they wanted to share or burden others with. But they'd also proven something essential about American character and capability. Against an enemy that was professional, experienced, and initially contemptuous of American fighting ability, these men had proven themselves superior. They'd taken mockery and turned it into respect, paid for in German and Japanese blood. Corporal James Rutherford, the Montana sniper who'd hunted his German counterpart through the Hürtgen Forest, perhaps put it best: "We weren't heroes. We were just Americans who knew how to shoot." The Germans thought that didn't matter anymore, that modern war was about machines and masses. We proved them wrong. Sometimes one man, with one rifle, making one perfect shot, matters more than 1,000 bullets sprayed in the enemy's direction. That's what they couldn't understand until it was too late. The M1903 Springfield rifle would serve American forces through the end of World War II and beyond, eventually being replaced by more modern sniper systems. But its legacy, and the legacy of the men who carried it, endures. They mocked American riflemen as inaccurate, dismissing them as undisciplined amateurs with fancy equipment. They learned, at distances measured in hundreds of yards and costs measured in thousands of lives, that American marksmanship was no joke. That the Springfield rifle, obsolete though it was, remained one of the most effective weapons on any battlefield when placed in trained hands. That farm boys from Kentucky and Tennessee, hunters from Michigan and Montana, could outshoot soldiers trained in the world's finest military academies. The story of Springfield snipers in World War II is ultimately about the value of individual excellence in an age of mass warfare. It's about men who brought skills learned in peace to the service of victory in war. It's about the moment when a nation of riflemen proved that marksmanship, real, hard-won marksmanship, still mattered in the modern world. But it's also a reminder of the cost. Each of those perfect shots, each eliminated an enemy officer or machine gunner, was a human life. The men who took those shots carried that burden for the rest of their lives. Some made peace with it. Others never did. All of them deserve to be remembered not just for their success, but for their sacrifice, the part of themselves they left on those distant battlefields when they picked up a rifle and went to war. Their story is one of skill and courage, of duty and sacrifice. It's a story that deserves to be told and remembered. This is what U.S. Last Stand exists to preserve: the forgotten stories, the hidden truths, the human experiences behind the history books. These men and their Springfield rifles changed warfare, but more importantly, they were human beings who carried burdens we can barely imagine. If their story moved you, If you want to learn more about the unsung heroes and forgotten battles of World War II and Vietnam, join us. There are so many more stories waiting to be discovered, so many more voices that need to be heard.